Mr. Tarantino, if I understood you correctly, you set the bar for good institutions being, do they provide value? Did I understand that correctly?
It's a little simplistic, but it depends on how you define value. There are lots of ways to define value. I would say if, as a student, and this is coming from the individual's perspective, if you get out of your education program what was either promised to you or what was intended. So for me, I'm an international relations major. I work in politics. That's kind of what I was intending anyway, so it was fine. But if I'm going to a vocational program that is saying you are going to get a job in accounting, or this leads to a field as in the healthcare field, and it turns out that your program actually doesn't prepare you for the licensing and certification test, nor does it qualify you to even remotely get a job. Things like nursing technology and financial management technician. I think that harms the value of the entire educational institution. And what we're finding is that because, as a country and as a separate problem, we don't collect sensible metrics on education almost at all, that it's very easy to hide. It's very easy for good institutions to get drowned out by bad actors.
Let me ask you, you talked about the for-profit institutions, but you left out not-for-profit institutions. Do all non-profit institutions provide value?
I don't think it's an either-or scenario, Senator. I think what we're seeing...
It's a simple question. Do you believe that all non-profit institutions provide value? Or is that a concern of yours for nonprofit?
I think that the for-profit, the value proposition in the for-profit institutions is severely in question due to graduate or dropout rates in the average of the 70%.
You said they were expensive and they had a high dropout rate, and the question is, should it be on employment? We've got gainful employment rules that take effect later this year. Are those good? Is that a good matrix?
I think it's a good start.
Okay.
And I'm looking forward to seeing them reported in a reasonable manner and not hidden in each individual school's website.
Let me ask you, which are the bad not-for-profit institutions?
Well, and I'm glad you asked, actually, because this is something that we've been trying to look at. It's not as easy as saying there's a good school and a bad school. I think that there are industry-wide problems with marketing and recruiting. Certainly the University of Phoenix and the Education Management Corporation, which are the top two GI Bill recipients, have serious problems.
I just asked you about the not-for-profit. Those would be for-profit, wouldn't they?
Well, I mean, you would have to look at their graduation rates, and I'm sure that there are bad ones,
too. So gainful employment actually has an impact, or graduation rates.
I think there's a significant difference, Senator, between a school whose job is...
Should we do it based upon how many years it takes an individual to graduate?
I think...
I've got community colleges in North Carolina that are visibly some of the best in the country. Mm-hmm. They have a graduation rate after 6 years of 28%. Is that good or bad?
It depends on how you compare programs. Community colleges serve 5 distinct populations, only one of which is mostly considered graduation in this country. The other 4 will never be counted as graduation. So to compare a community college to an institution that is a for-profit, primarily vocational school is not a light comparison.
Is it fair to compare it to a not-for-profit institution?
It depends on the programs that the not-for-profit offers.
Well, you said that gainful employment should be a good gauge, right?
I have no problem with establishing gainful employment reporting across the education.
Why would you exclude gainful employment from the evaluation of not-for-profit institutions, which is what the President did?
I don't have a problem with extending gainful employment. In fact, IAVA has been consistent in saying that all of these metrics should be recorded across the board. But we have to acknowledge that there is a significant difference between an institution whose job it is and mission it is to primarily educate and an organization which has a major profit motive. And I think that that adds something into the equation.
And I ask this more because I'm on the health committee. Should we be looking at for-profit hospitals differently than we do not-for-profit hospitals?
It's not the same comparison.
Oh, it's not?
You know.
Why is that? It's the same label, isn't it?
No, actually, Senator, it's not.
For-profit institutions have...
For-profit institutions take almost 90%, on an average 86% government funded. These are not institutions that are businesses. These are institutions that are unregulated government programs. These institutions are not funded by the free market. These institutions are funded by tax dollars.
How much of the not-for-profit world is funded by the federal government?
They're public schools. Senator. And I think a lot of them are funded primarily by a lot of private tuition. But it's also, it's hard, you cannot compare.
There are a lot of for-profit schools people pay to go. The government is not the sole payer of for-profit institutions.
If you add in military benefits and financial aid, that number is easily over 90% on average for for-profit schools. And you know this, Senator, because you're on the committee that did the investigation.
I wouldn't call that an investigation. I'd call it a whitewash. But we'll have that debate later on. Let me ask you, Mr. Myers, do you agree that excluding not-for-profit institutions is a good practice in the game?